back from Burma is the great Andreas of Austria. Andreas?
Yes, that's correct. I went
So
to Burma recently twice.
You went there twice.
Yes, I went there twice, in February and in April.
So we haven't talked to each other since.
No, not at all.
Since,
We haven't talked for a long time. I think 8 weeks or so.
so in that time, you went to Burma twice.
Yes.
So what is the state of all this? Is the this project going to go forward with the island and the hotel and the scuba diving?
Yes, probably. I'm going back there in October. Work there, which is interesting because I went to Burma 10 years ago and stayed there for half a year or so, and I did a lot of diving there, and I got to know this beautiful island, very small one. Nobody lives there, and I always wanted to go back to this island because it's the most beautiful one I've seen ever, anywhere in the world, and now I got this job offer to work there, which is great, to explore new dive sites, take care of the guests, things like this, but also administrational things.
I remember when we talked, you were really excited about this. Is your level of excitement the same? Has it grown?
No, because the moment life is not that easy at home in Austria, so I'm more concentrated on other things.
But there's no complications, at least with the dive site, the diving in Burma.
I don't think so.
As you dream.
Many things can happen. My family at the moment is facing big challenges, so you never know what is happening. But tell me something about your human side projects.
Well, the first book is finished.
Yeah, how many copies did you print?
Well, there's 60 copies.
Okay.
There's 60, and a few have been distributed already. So there's not 60 anymore.
But to people you knew already, or to people that were interested, and then which passed the test to get a copy of this book?
Some who have passed the test.
Ah, really? How did they find out that this book exists?
It seems there's some disturbance from the Colombians. What?
How did they find out that this book exists?
Well, I'm kind of. The idea was to leave these traces, like these crumbs, around the internet that the book existed. And
how do you do this?
Because I think this book is something that should be discovered only by people that have searched for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of. I don't want to market it. I don't want to make a brand. I don't want to do anything. I want people who are dedicated to discover it.
Okay.
Because this is a book that I discovered because I looked for it and I found it, and I want the same sort of readers to discover this translation that I've done.
And did you get some feedback already from the readers, or from some of them?
Not readers that I don't know. I've only gotten feedback from people that I already know.
Okay.
But I think it's just getting out there now. The human side is just starting to get a presence on the internet where it's actually coming up in Google searches. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I actually put a preview copy of the book online.
Okay.
On Amazon and also at different places for free. So you could read like 5 poems in the introduction, Hampson's foreword, and so it's possible to see some of it. But the idea is that the book will never be available in digital format. It will never be.
Yeah, it's a piece of love.
It's a piece of love. Yes, it's a hardcover piece of love.
Yeah, but which is interesting because actually. Everything started with I don't know but many years ago when we met in Colombia, the idea was actually to publish your works digitally, right?
Well, that was well. You read some of my early writing, and you were the first person. You were the first person that I didn't know really who read it and loved it, and it was your encouragement that I would publish it online, just for fun. And so yeah, and at that hostel in Cali, Colombia, I put the book together and I published it then.
Yeah, but do you still plan to publish some of your books digitally, or
No.
only in this physical form you did with the Hamsun poems?
No, I removed all those books, the digital copies. Yeah, I think my plan is eventually to edit those books and publish them in physical form, and that would be it. There won't be any digital copy of those books. And for one thing, I think they needed some editing. I think part of the problem with a lot of my writing has been that I've been very limited for time. I've only had basically like 6 months free to try and write everything that I wanted to write, and then I had to either go to work in Alaska, or I had to ride my bicycle somewhere. And now, and then I was a truck driver, still doing that, and so it's very, very limited, the amount of time that I have for doing books, especially original writing. It's much easier to translate. You can kind of do a line here and do a line there, but to sit down and to write literature is very difficult. To write philosophy is much harder.
Okay,
that's the hardest of all.
Because recently I was thinking about this very much. But do you think without your personal projects, the books and everything, it would be possible for you to work as a truck driver or something else similar to this for a long period without getting, I don't know, drained or burned out? Because you're not, or bored out. I don't know, because you're not doing something that you're actually doing for yourself.
Well, that's true, and one of the reasons why I undertook this project of translating the Hamsun poetry was because I felt like I was just existing. I felt like I'd kind of written a lot of the stuff down that I wanted to write down. I didn't have the energy to do philosophy and to try and advance the stuff I was working on then. And I had to work to feed myself and feed others, and I felt kind of trapped. And I discovered that the one thing I could do was to translate something, and that brought me back to a good feeling that I was doing something, because translation, it's a very creative act. It's not as highly creative as other things where you're making something from scratch, but it was also the subject matter, because Hamsun at this time of his life was in a terrible state. He was in agony, and in fact, the book of poetry that he wrote was him returning back to a creative state, and he got there by going back to his childhood home in the north of Norway, in the fjords and the natural beauty of that land, the animals, the forests. And so in translating this, I felt Hamsun's rebirth, and it was kind of my own rebirth in doing the translation, but it also reminded me of my own childhood in Wisconsin and those places, the wild places, my grandparents. And whenever I can remember that, I always feel good. Remembering your home and your family. But
do you think the process of the actual making of the books, I mean the physical books, was as important as translating the poems?
Yes, I think it was all important, and it was a huge challenge. And I broke my hand, fractured my hand in a couple of places. It's still not fully mended, but
how did that happen?
I was winding up the landing gear on a truck, and the landing gear crank, like the weight of the trailer, kind of spring-loaded the crank arm. It's a big steel crank arm. And it shot around at a high speed. It just shot out of my hand. But before I could withdraw my hand, it cracked my hand about 3 times at least before I could pull my hand away. And I could feel nothing in my hand, and I felt pain all the way up to my shoulder. It was very bad pain. I thought immediately it was broken.
Okay.
But
you did not go to the hospital.
No, they would just tell. I mean, the problem with doing that is that then they wouldn't let me work, and I'd have to be on special disability, and I didn't want to do any of that. I needed to work, and I figured if I could grip my hand, it's just my right hand. I could use my left hand, and I figured it would be an interesting challenge to just continue.
Okay, how long did it take to recover your hand? Is it fully functional now?
Well, it was feeling really good, and then I decided to help somebody. There was a guy. He was trying to. Well, it was 2 events in the same night. In fact, I was helping 2 people, and I refractured my hand by helping them. The first was a guy who was trying to close the doors on a trailer, and he couldn't do it. And so I jumped out and I said, "Hey, I've got a hammer," and I ran over there with my hammer. And I started hammering the door to get it closed, and I felt pain shoot through my hand, and I realized, wherever the fracture near the wrist, I felt that pain immediately, and I thought, oh, geez, I just refractured it. It was getting really good. I thought it was okay, and now I've done it. And then the next thing you know, another guy, he was having problems moving it's called a fifth wheel. It's the part of the tractor which you connect the trailer to, the kingpin. He needed to move that, and he couldn't do it, didn't know how to do it. And it gets rusted and stuff, so you got to hammer it. So I got out again with my hammer. With my bad hand now hurting, I smashed it again with the hammer, and then my hand hurt even more. So now I'm in pain again. But I still work out. I still make the books. You can't stop.
When did you first fracture your hand? When was it?
Probably I think maybe 8 or 9 months ago.
Okay. Oh my God. Yeah, maybe you should take a rest.
I've changed my idea about rest though. I think rest, it doesn't actually help healing. You should be active, but active to a point. You want to protect the thing that's been broken. But you want to. You also want to also strengthen all of the area around what's been broken. Not let it just not do anything. And so.
But that made making the books more difficult for you. What kind of steps are involved to make a book, the way you do it?
You've got to take all the pages and you have to sew them together with thread. Then you have to glue them. You have to reinforce the binding, where you've glued it. Then you have to make the covers with fabric and cardboard. Everything has to be cut. You have to glue on the end papers that connect the cardboard cover to the text. There's a tremendous amount of work involved. And every work requires a certain skill that you have to work at until you get good. So it's kind of like every one of these books. The first few copies, when I was doing a new thing, were my not good copies. But by the 60th copy, I was really good at what I was doing, because I never did one book completely. I'd always do one of the skills 60 times. And then I would go on to the next one. I'd do it 60 times. I'd do 60 times gluing, 60 times sewing. That's the way it was done. And so you get, but the books are, even the worst books are beautiful. The measurements are all precise. Everything was done really well. And some of the early ones, even when I was sewing, there's even a bit of blood in the books, dried blood. So you imagine the blood of the poet. I think there was a great film by Jean Cocteau, the Frenchman, called Blood of the Poet. I'm not sure though that that's what he had in mind, that the poet would stick himself with a needle as he was knitting books. But
I don't know.
But enough about these books. Let's get back to Burma. So
okay.
So you went to the island, And you met the hotel proprietor?
Yes, and I did some exploration of the island, of some dive sites, and there is more potential to discover new dive sites, which is basically the main reason why I go there, because it's such a privilege to be able to dive somewhere where nobody ever else or nobody ever dived before, and it's still a great diving destination, and this island is just pure nature, so it's going to be a very interesting life on the island. I did it before on a different island nearby, but I loved. This was maybe the best time of my life, because you don't have to deal with all of the problems you're facing here in the modern world. But of course there's other challenges, and yeah, let's see how it goes. Maybe you can visit me then.
Well, I'd like to visit you. I'd also like to do some diving.
Yeah, or at least free diving. We can do some free diving together.
I'm someone who's never done anything like that in my life. I mean, what would you recommend? Like, how would that go for me?
I think you're more the free diver person, not the scuba diver.
What does that mean, free diving?
Yeah, you just dive with the air in your lungs. Then you try to stay down as long as possible.
Yeah, but I go to the bottom of a swimming pool like 10 feet, and I feel like my ears are going to explode.
Yeah, but because you're not equalizing your ears. But let's not talk about things like this, because that is boring. I can teach you. I can teach you how to do it properly. The breathing techniques, and of course also the pressure challenges, but which are not challenges, because you can easily equalize your ears.
Really?
Yeah, most people can do it. 99% of the people can do it.
Well, I hope I'm not in that 1%. If I'm not in that 1%, I'll be okay.
No, you'll be fine. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Yeah, I think you would like it.
Well, how deep could I go as a free diver?
I think within 3 days, 15 meters.
15 meters.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
45 feet.
I could see quite a bit. And
yeah, it's very diverse marine life.
Wow. And why do you think, though, that free diving would interest me more than scuba diving?
I don't know, for the same reason, because you're a person that prefers to produce books by hand instead of publishing books in a digital form.
That's a great way. So when people come to the hotel, you say, raise your hand if you prefer books in a digital form. And you say, oh, you're scuba divers. We have a group of scuba divers with us today. Yeah. Well, all right, so you took these 2 trips. How long were these 2 trips?
No, both a week. So 2 weeks in total. But as I said, I went to this island 10 years ago many times between dives. So I've seen it without anything on it. No bungalows, nothing. And now there's a few bungalows on it, and yeah. Now they try to get guests on this island.
How do you feel about that?
You cannot avoid it, I think. I mean, it's such a beautiful place, and beautiful places are always popular. And I think they will try to keep it as untouched as much as possible. But of course, tourism always has an impact. But it's not. There will never be mass tourism. Probably not even in the whole island group. Maybe in the whole archipelago. Yeah, hard to say. But it is remote. Not only the island, the whole archipelago. The access is not that easy. I mean, maybe it will completely change in 30 years. You never know, but 30 years ago, many parts of other countries which are now destroyed were still beautiful. But we will see. It's at the very beginning. It's like other now popular tourist destinations, but 40 years ago.
Well, I think probably though that whenever a place is very difficult to get to, it's a lot easier to maintain its pristine nature.
Yeah, probably. I hope so.
You know, as long as there's no airport. I mean, still, people have to fly around the world to get to that place to begin with. How many scuba divers? Scuba divers are mostly Westerners, and right?
Yeah, there's a lot of Asians too.
Oh, Asians.
Yeah,
into
but
scuba diving?
yeah, I mean, I totally know what you mean. There's always environmental questions you have to ask yourself when you travel somewhere. But I mean, this is 2019. You cannot avoid it. You can reduce it, but if you want to go somewhere beautiful, tropical, then for most Westerners that means we have to take a flight, which is sad, but it is how it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many people on the planet, and it's only gonna the amount of the population is only expanding.
Yeah.
Everything is being overrun. We're fortunate that we're even living at a time where there are places that you can go to, like this place.
There's not many left like this, I think. I mean, especially tropical islands, jungle and mountains. Yeah, there's still many places that are pretty much untouched and not discovered yet.
How did you find this island in the first place? Was this a place that you'd heard about, or?
What do you mean in the first place? 10 years ago, or
yeah,
just recently?
Yeah.
No, 10 years ago.
When?
Because there's a dive site nearby, which I call the signature dive site of this island, and between the dives we just went to the bay and spent the time between the dives there, and it's just the most beautiful bay I've ever seen.
Are you able to kind of look at a map or look at topography and be able to guess that there could be something interesting in a place and then want to go there? I mean, is that part of your research?
I mean, when I looked at so many nautical charts, for example, old British nautical charts because Burma used to be a British colony, so there's there's nautical charts made by the Brits, and I looked so many hours on these charts, and I collected in the last 10 years I collected every kind of information, rumor whatsoever about this archipelago, and so I have a collection of information which is very useful for GPS coordinates, rumors in sailors' books, and all this kind of stuff. And you can use this information to find new dive sites, for example. And we tried. It worked a couple of times already, and there's still a lot more further out potential dive sites, and I'm very looking forward to explore them.
So some of the information that you researched was accurate. You went and you
Yes.
found something.
The GPS coordinates were not accurate, but nearby. Yeah, because in the sailor's book, for example, it just had GPS coordinates which were just approximately at the actual position, but you talk to fishermen and things like this, and or the boat captain, and then you combine all of this information and then you give it a try, and it worked. And it worked already in Burma for me a couple of years ago when I went there on a liveaboard trip. And I heard rumors about a pinnacle. I jumped into the water a couple of times 10 years ago to find it. It never worked. And then I could convince, on the liveaboard, I could convince the captain to look for it because he had a big boat with a depth sounder, and we could finally find it, and it was a fantastic dive site. And always where there's a lot of fishing going on, fishing boats. That's a good hint to look for something. Maybe there is a reef or a bank or something like this below the surface you cannot see from above.
Right, because the fish are gathering in places where there's food, and food is created by having objects and formations, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So you went on these exploratory missions with captains. You just tell them that you want to go here, and you jump out, and you take a look around.
I mean,
that's what you're doing.
Along the coastline of the island, it's quite easy. You just take a look at the topography above. You snorkel a little bit. We have some drone footage where and the water was very clear this day, so you could see down quite well from the drone picture, and then you just give it a try, and a couple of times it turned out to be a great dive set with interesting topography, beautiful corals, marine life, a good dive profile, things like this.
So what is the next step with this Norwegian owner? He's hired you. He wants you to come back. And
yes, in October probably, when the season starts again.
Oh, okay. So the season will start. You're going to stay then. How long are you going to stay for?
No, the whole season.
But
in the meantime, I tried to. 7 months. It's a 7-month season. There's monsoons in Southeast Asia.
Right.
Yes, so that's the plan. But yeah, I'm more curious about your projects. What's the next book you're working on, or you're printing, you're making yourself with your hands, your broken hands?
Yes, with my broken hands. I'm gonna make another book. Well, I'm waiting on this this Bulgarian translator of the poetry of Varlam Shalamov to finish, and his book.
But he was Russian, right?
A Russian Bulgarian.
Okay.
The writer Shalamov is Russian. Was
yeah.
imprisoned in the Gulag for 17 years. The poetry is beautiful.
But why are you waiting for someone? You could work on the Home Depot book, for example, because
yes.
you told me
Well,
wanted to make this an actual book too, right? The Home Depot stories.
Yes, this is going to be one of the next books as well. I still need to write. I want to write a new introduction, and I want to write at least two more stories that weren't written. I discussed these people with you, but I never wrote the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you'll love these additional stories.
But do you think you can remember the conversations you had with them, or the conversations they had with somebody else? Because it's so. When was it? That's like
I remember
9 years ago.
I was thinking about my memory the other day, and all the stuff that I want to use for its material for stories and I want to write about. I remember it very, very clearly, and I can remember it for years.
Okay.
But a lot of the events that, like things I've done that I didn't write down, even extraordinary things, I forget them and I move on. Like whole parts of my life seem very distant to me. I mean, I know that they happened, but I certainly don't remember them with the clarity that I do the material from certain events that I want to use for stories and I want to write. And so it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing about memory. I'm very selective with what I choose to remember. I choose to remember stuff that has aesthetic value that I could do something with. The rest of it is just not. It's not interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. A lot of people dwell on the past. They think about the past. I don't know. I was thinking about the past the other day. The past, I think, is just painful.
Yeah.
Even
I was thinking about the past recently so much. Oh my God.
What were you thinking?
All the family issues I'm carrying around for so many years, and I finally told them to my family, especially my father, and I don't know, so many things which were hidden somewhere came up, and that's the reason why I told you before we started the podcast that there's a lot of personal things happening right now in my life, and thinking about the past was one of it.
It sounds like you had a discussion with your family.
Yeah.
You know what happened?
Yeah, because at the moment there's some health issues too within my family. You know, cancer, and one of my siblings is highly depressed.
Right.
And family. Coming from a cold family, you know, emotionally cold, is not a good base to have a happy life. And also coming back to the first podcast we did, I think, you know, when we talked about losing my soul and things like this, I think that all comes from my past actually. I was looking for actual reasons for losing my soul, you know, because I had so many different symptoms, but it is all just physical, psychological problems. It's nothing physical.
Like the physical manifestation of.
And I could see it again recently with pain in my spine. And you can control pain with your mind if you think positive. It's incredible. You can make it go away and things like this. So you hear it so many times, the connection between mind, body, and soul, and you always think, okay, yeah, that's bullshit talk, but it is so true actually.
I think a lot of times it's at the extremes though. A lot of people think that they have a limit for pain, let's say. Like you're working out and you think, okay, I can't go any further. And what's interesting, though, is to try and go further and to actually go further and to discover that when you get beyond that supposed limit point that you thought was a limit, you've opened up new territory.
So breaking your hand, did it open up a new territory, you think?
Yeah. No,
because you said it's also an experiment to find out how it heals itself. Because I'm a strong believer of the healing function, the healing capability of the body. But 9 months is a very long time for a fracture, right? So maybe it's time to do something about it. So maybe the experiment did not work.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that I promoted healing very well. I was just ignoring the pain and pushing forward because I didn't want to have my projects interrupted. I didn't want to stop working. I didn't want to stop making books. I didn't want to stop anything, and so I just ignored the pain and continued. And there was also a bit of ego involved. I kept telling myself, what a great hero I was. That I could have all these disabilities and still be productive,
mm-hmm.
and then I could come on podcasts and I could talk about how great I was, and you could break my hands and I'd still make books by hand, and it sounds just great. Sounds great, but the pain is real. I mean, it hurts. It hurts right now. I have this big bump that swells up. It's like a bone. It's not a bruise, but it's like it's hard like a bone, and do bones swell when they're fractured? Like if you
I don't know, maybe there's some liquid inside.
I have no idea, but it doesn't hurt when you push it. But when I'm working and when I'm doing things, when I'm working out, it gets larger. I don't know. It's not swollen. It's not like a bruise. It's not discolored. It's just this very solid, bone hard ball, and it grows and shrinks.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it.
So what about work? Is it hard work at the moment? Like physically hard work you have to do, or is it just more or less driving?
I don't do a whole lot of driving now. I take 2 trailers. They're called pup trailers, and I connect them with a dolly, which is this little connector thing, and I take them about 40 miles to another center, and I take them apart, and I put them both into doorways so they could be unloaded. And then I go inside the center, and I get on a forklift, and I unload trailers, and I reload trailers for between 4, 5, sometimes 6 hours. And then at the end of the night, I load my own 2 trailers up for myself, and I drive them back from where I came, the 40 miles. And that's the night. Essentially, I spend most of the night on a forklift. But it's good because forklifting is good exercise. You get off the forklift. You have to do things. You have to lift things. You have to make decisions about loading trailers. And I'm a very skilled forklift operator. There's video evidence. Mm-hmm. So I love using this machinery and doing it gracefully. I like to do things with tremendous grace, but also learning and getting better. And so I think my forklifting, after Alaska, my forklifting was at a really high level, but I think now it's probably even a higher level.
Okay.
Yeah, really good.
Speaking of high level, do you think there's enough potential to write a book about the people you meet working as a truck and forklift driver or operator, as you say, to write about these people, similar to the Home Depot stories? Or are they not as interesting as the Home Depot people?
I mean, I'm always looking for stories, but I haven't really discovered much. What's interesting is that these are. I think the most interesting thing is that I'm living in Texas, which is the South, and people speak differently. It's my first Southern experience, and I think generally the cultural stuff and the differences from what I've known, it's just extraordinary to me that this is America. This is a whole other part of America, and it's very different. That's interesting, but it's not worth writing about. And the people are not sufficiently interesting to write about. Mm-hmm. They all have interesting stories, and there's some people that are very, very, very nice people that I've gotten to meet. And I think I would just say that the Home Depot people were so extraordinarily damaged and were so low. I mean, they're the bottom, and these people who I'm working with now are not at the bottom.
Okay,
they're closer to the middle, and whenever you're in the middle is often not very exciting. It's, the very top and the very bottom are both exciting, but the middle's a little boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's stories about going to jail, and there's some drugs, and everyone's got a bunch of kids and social and family problems, but that's become so common now. And it's so depressing. I don't even want to write about it. It's not interesting to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Walking around here in Austria, in Vienna, I just think, oh my God. Having the same day all over again, meeting the same people, seeing the same people. I think society or people became very boring nowadays. There's not many people that stand out from the crowd, I think.
Well, it's hard to. I think that it's the whole nature of globalization, where everyone is connected with the same Facebook and the same Instagram. The same. They all want to go to the same places, take the same pictures, and everyone thinks of themselves as this great individual who's created themselves. But they all are exactly the same. They're all the same brand.
I totally agree. Yeah.
But it's strange. I have this idea, and I need to write about it philosophically because I think it's interesting. It's that it's actually through the breakdown of communication, and when communities become isolated and people become isolated, then you get difference. And you see this in terms of animal species, where like the bonobo monkeys and those other monkeys, they were separated by a river, and on one side they were savages and killers, and on the other side they just make love all the time, and completely different, but separated only by a river. But they came from the same ancestry, and they just were separated, and they radically diverged. Globalization is all about getting rid of those differences, that there would be no rivers to divide us. And they keep saying, at least politically, they're saying, if we can all live together and see each other as brothers and sisters and live in peaceful harmony, this will be a better world. Well, it'll be a worse world in the sense of diversity. We won't have different thoughts. We won't have different trajectories of human life. We'll all be on the same path. We'll all be sharing the same thoughts. And if we're all connected virtually, then we really will be sharing all the same thoughts. And we'll have governments monitoring it, making sure that it's not hateful. We're being nice. We're saying the right things. It's a disaster. It's the opposite of diversity. It's the opposite. So. It's the total opposite of all the things they're saying that it is.
That's the reason why I feel so comfortable in Burma, or especially on the island. Or also 10 years ago, I called the Burmese co-workers 10 years ago on the island. I called them a family I never had, basically. But these people are still so different, you know. It was a military dictatorship until I think 2012. So it was not part of the rest of the world, really. And people are still very pure. They don't share the same values as most other people. And also, Colombia. I think Colombians are very similar to Westerners nowadays. The same values, the same goals, the same boring lives. But in Burma, it's still different. I mean, I still love Latin America. It's has a lot of advantages. Also the mentality has a lot of things that I like very much. But yeah, Burmese people, they are completely different. I wonder how it is in North Korea. It must be interesting to meet these people.
I think any place that's been separated from the rest of where globalization's not gone, it's always interesting. And that could be because of geography. You know, if you go to like places far away, but even the places far away now, even the Inuit kids are rappers now. Mm-hmm. They're rapping. I mean, it's just ridiculous that these things would come to them. And this very dominant culture, and it's dominant because of its technology. And it has mastered the technologies of communication and transportation. And between these two spears of this powerful technological civilization, they're transforming the world. And the only way to stop it is to be isolated as a result of geopolitics, like North Korea or Burma. That's really the only way. Or is to have no electricity. Like in, I think one of the interesting places that you never visited that I think you would love is Patagonia. Mm-hmm. And the people there are just wonderful. And I think really the people are wonderful is because transportation and communication break down in Patagonia. It's very hard to get to. The roads are not very good. There are not very many roads. There are not a lot of people. And they have sporadic power. So the power is always going out. They have to have their own generator. So you don't really have internet. You don't have phone lines. You don't have all this stuff. So they're unconnected. And it makes for just wonderful people. They share everything with you. I mean, all of the great things about meeting people when they meet a traveler that you experienced in Burma, the same thing happens in Patagonia. The same thing used to happen in Colombia. Colombia now has become a tourist spot, so it's not the narco state that it used to be, where everyone was disconnected and people were good because they had these dangers that kind of forced them to become good. It's interesting how danger brings out good things in people.
Yeah. War as well.
War, yeah. You hear these stories all the time about guys who go to war saying that was the best experience of their life. Fighting with their comrades.
No, but I mean people staying at home. Families that stay at home. I think it's for them. It's the most intense time of their life too, and it. Then they have to show sides of a human being which are much more human than without being in such an extraordinary, difficult situation. Yeah, but you have plans to go back to Patagonia?
Oh, I'd like to. That's the one place in South America that I really want to go back to.
So
And
no more Colombia?
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I want to go. I want to go back, and I want to do another cycling trip. But I wanted to do a very bold cycling trip. I want to cycle the abandoned roads over the Andes passes, the abandoned passes between Chile and Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And these, I think these are like old mining areas. I don't know exactly, but it would be a real challenge. It probably would be dangerous, and you might have to carry the bike. You might have to hike. It might. Who knows? It'd be very challenging.
And in what way do you want to write this book or whatever, this text about the thoughts you just mentioned a few minutes ago?
Well, I want to write a book. I have plans eventually to do a book of philosophy. I've already written some of it, but
in Wittgenstein style. No, recently I was told that he pronounced his name the English way. Right? Is that correct? He did not like the German pronunciation of his name.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it could be true. It could be true.
Somebody told me recently.
It might very well be true. He was a great man. He did whatever he wanted. I mean, there were.
No, but so your text, your philosophical text, do you want to write it in the Wittgenstein way? Because this is what you did on your blog, right? Because I thought, oh my god, that's the same bullshit as Wittgenstein
did. Yeah, I'm gonna write the same way. Yeah, no, I've already written.
Or you want to make it more accessible?
I actually think that writing in these that style, the aphoristic style, those short passages, I think that's the best way to do writing. And I think even now it's probably the best way after all, because these people are so used to reading Twitter. Twitter is like just a bunch of aphorisms, very short statements, and you move on to the next one.
No, I don't know. Never used it. Never read it.
I've never used it either. I've never read it either. But I understand that this is what everyone uses now. Everyone that I don't know. I don't know. I mean, do the guys I work with truck driving? Are they on Twitter? I highly doubt it. That's the interesting thing, is that when you turn on the internet and you read about all of this this outrage, people are angry about something someone said and they want them banned, or there are these movements like the Me Too movement with the hashtag.
But are these things you talk about at work with your colleagues?
No.
So
not at all.
But are you talking about Netflix shows and Game of Thrones and I don't know the newest PlayStation game, or they talk a lot about the latest results in football or hockey or basketball or whatsoever.
Actually, there's very little communication.
Okay.
And I try not to communicate with those people really, because inevitably they know that I'm not a Texan, and
but is that a problem for them?
What?
Is that a problem for them that you're not from Texas?
No, but it might make them curious, and I fear them starting to ask questions about where I'm from. I have the one advantage that people think I'm much younger than I am. So if I say, yeah, I'm from Chicago, and I was a truck driver before, that usually is enough. People think, that's his whole life right there. Mm-hmm. He's from Chicago and he's a truck driver, and there's no reason to ask any more questions. They think that that's my whole life right there. Because the reality is, if I were to talk about everything I've done in my life, it's just ridiculous. Hey, who's going to believe that? It's just, I don't even, when I think about it, I think, come on, Peter. You were there, you did that, you were there. It's just ridiculous. I'm very happy. I think the best way to look at your life is you try and view your life as a book you want to read, like a biography you want to read. And when you have a challenge in front of you and you say, "Oh, this is very hard to do." Well, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, that's the kind of biography that you want to read about the guy who took that challenge and then took the next challenge and then, he did this. And so anything that's challenging, even in a tough way that's painful, people want to read about that kind of stuff. It's dramatic. And if it's in your life, then you can control that story. So it's like a story you're telling yourself. You're this guy who's going through it. And it's exciting. You find out, and also you find out if you can handle it or not, Am I strong enough for this? Will this kill me? Maybe it kills you. I mean, so what? Okay, then you're dead. Oh, well.
I don't know. I mean, I was never when I did my adventures, I did not have normally an insurance. So I was not thinking very much about is it possible to get killed, or if I was thinking, okay, then I cannot change it anyway because nobody could help me there. I don't know. I think for a lot of people, these are the main questions. If they are able to, or if they think, are they able to do something like this or not?
When you went on your adventures.
Sorry?
When you went on these adventures, like let's say to Burma, was it just like the idea came to you and you knew that you had to do it, and you never sat down and said to yourself, well, what if things go wrong? What do I do then? And maybe this is dangerous. And
no, I was always more attracted to these countries that have a dangerous reputation, or a reputation of being dangerous. This makes them actually more interesting, more appealing to me, because I also think that the people in these countries are generally nicer or more interesting than the people living in safe countries. I was never really scared of things like this, and I had some life-threatening experiences, and I'm still doing it. I mean, I'm getting lazy too. I'm getting older. I have seen so much. Going to these places does not mean so much anymore to me, because I have so much experience, so much. I've just seen so much that it's not as exciting anymore. I remember the first time.
Do you feel like there's kind of two things happening? One, you've already been to a lot of the great places, and then two, perhaps the world is also becoming more boring.
Yes, so definitely. But I still try. I mean, every once in a while you do a city trip. In February I flew to Rome because I had 5 days off from work, and it was a birthday present for my nephew. But I realized one more time, this is just nothing that interests me. I mean, Rome, it's a very interesting city. All of the historical stuff, it is very impressive, but it is so touristy, seriously. And it's, at the end of the day, it's just another city. Why should you go? Why should you fly to another city without doing anything else? You can go to other cities in other countries, but I think you should combine it with the true experience. Can be nice beach holiday, but which is nothing I do. But I can imagine some people just love being at the beach very much and having a nice hotel, and then they should maybe go to a city nearby and explore the cultural attractions or historical attractions. But so many people just fly to Amsterdam and to Berlin and to Rome and Madrid and Barcelona just to be in another city again. And I don't understand this. This is nothing I want to do ever again.
Well, because do you think the cities are all kind of the same? So.
Yeah, of course.
There's no reason to. You're
I
just
mean,
changing.
No, there's a reason to go to cities, but don't go to the cities without going somewhere else. You know, if I fly to Naples, which is for me a very interesting city because I just love pizza, especially the one from Naples. But I take the train a couple of hundreds kilometers south, Calabria in the mountains, or on the coast. It's beautiful. You get wonderful food and Italian atmosphere. And then on the way back, you just have a day in the big city. But just don't. I think people should not fly just to be able to say, I was in 15 capitals of Europe. And so many people. This is how people travel nowadays, and it's really
true,
boring.
And they also think that that's they've learned something.
And they go to the same shops as they do in their hometown or in their city where they live. All of these major big companies, they are around the world now, so you see so many very similar things in all these cities. And I think in smaller places the differences are still much bigger. So the traveling to small places can be a town, I don't know, maybe 100, 200,000 people. It's still much more interesting to explore these places because they are more different to your hometown compared to the capital of your country to the capital of a country far away.
Well, one of the things that's one of the reasons I like Dallas as much as I do. It's because it's very undeveloped in terms of cities, like the rest of the big cities. And some people will say, people that I know from New York, they'll say, "Why do you live in Dallas? Oh, it's terrible. I mean, it's in Texas. Really? You like it there?" They can't believe it. They think that New York, you should live in New York. You should live in L.A. You could live in Chicago now. These are the cities. But Dallas, that's not really a city. It's just like some backwoods place. But that's precisely why I like it. I like walking through the downtown, and there are abandoned buildings, and there's bad streets that are broken apart. The things which aren't pretty. I like all that.
Why is the city center abandoned?
It's not abandoned. It just is. It's not developed.
No, I mean
some
buildings. How is it possible that in a big city like Dallas that there is buildings which are not used?
Because it's just not a. I think the primary industry. It's not a financial center. Finance is usually a reason why they build stuff up in the center. You also, the Texas people have a different mentality. They don't want to live in the city. They think living in a big house, a big Texas mansion, and having their plot of land is the dream. Mm-hmm. And living in a city with lots of other people is a nightmare.
So are rents or apartments, are they cheap in the city center in Dallas?
Well, I mean, when I tell people what I pay, they think it's expensive. But for me, I compare.
Yeah, but you're not really in the city center, I would say.
I am. I'm a mile away probably from the exact center of the city.
Yeah, but it has a very suburban touch, in my opinion.
What? You think so?
Yeah.
No. It's a very it's an old industrial part with.
Okay.
There was a lot of small factories. The original Coca-Cola factory was here. Mm-hmm. This is where I live. Is for me architecturally, it's the most interesting. I love the old buildings that were factories that you can live in. The loft spaces, the brick. I love the old decaying brick. These were well-made buildings that there's no reason to knock down. Their structures are great, and they're great for living. Artists would live in such places. The whole past tradition in New York City, where all the artists lived in Soho, and they lived in these old industrial buildings. It was very cheap to do it back then. That's why they lived there, and they had a lot of space. But Dallas kind of has that similar feel, although in some ways they're trying to replicate that New York idea here, which I hate. just try and be Dallas. You don't have to be like New York. Everything wants to be like New York now. It's just awful. And I don't really like all the graffiti because it's all legal graffiti. They hired artists to go do graffiti. You don't hire artists to do graffiti. Graffiti is dangerous, and it's something done in the dark of night with the cops chasing you, and you stay secret, and everything is just now it's fake. But at least here it's less fake, a little bit less fake. But eventually Dallas will be like every other city. It will be, with all these LA people in particular moving here. A lot of California people.
For what reason are they moving to Dallas? Because it's so expensive in California?
Yeah, LA is very expensive, and there's a huge amount of California people coming to. Well, they were coming to Austin. Austin's was kind of the first place everyone goes because it's the big liberal city. So everyone's always thought of Austin as being this cool place, but now Dallas is drawing people, and I don't know. I you know what? I can't even really speak about it. I live here, but I don't really live here. I'm not connected. I have no friends. I was mostly in a truck for the last 3 years, not even here. So I don't really know. I can't say. I don't know much about anything anymore. I'm just trying to get my projects done.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean when you say you don't know much anymore, because I was overthinking many things already, and I don't have many friends here in Vienna too. You have some of these friends that are as weird as you, scattered around the world, but meeting a person here in Vienna normally is not the most exciting thing. So it's hard to make friends. I don't know. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe it is just how it is. But maybe I could give it a second chance. But it is really hard for me too. But then
perhaps,
again, I'm not hesitating. Like I'm not hiding myself. I'm talking about who I am. I give it a try. But you live this solitary life basically without even trying to be connected. I don't do this. I still try to be connected, but it's just disappointing to realize, okay, at the end of the day, it doesn't really make much sense because we are so different nowadays, most people and me. But
I was always looking for. I don't need to share this someone. I don't need to have shared experiences to be friendly with someone. It's more a sensibility about life. And I know that when you and I met, I knew immediately that you were someone who felt a similar way about so many things, and we could talk very easily about anything as a result of that. True. And I don't often feel that with people. And you know within a few minutes. If someone shares a sensibility, an openness, a curiosity, it's just some combination of curiosity is the big thing. And I don't think people are very curious anymore.
No, they're not.
But I mean, really curious. Real curiosity is like what you were doing with those old nautical maps. You were trying to find something that no one was even talking about, or they talked about 100 years ago, and you were doing this research. That's curiosity. It's the same curiosity why I wanted to translate this book. I was curious about what Hampson had written, and I wanted to feel it and understand it in a deep way. That's curiosity, and these are projects which are personal projects. They may lead to nothing. They're not projects that are done to make money or to build a brand or to show off or you almost feel bad to talk about them to people that don't appreciate them in any way. You feel as though you've exposed yourself unnecessarily, and it's just there was no reason to show yourself in this way because it wouldn't be appreciated. So you feel badly for doing it. But you talk about these things that you care about with people.
Yeah, I do. and I mean, I get some how do you say, admiration for having a life like this. Some people are extremely curious, and they think, wow, how is it possible to live a life like this? I would never be that brave. So I think there's a lot of people that would actually love to exchange the way they live to a more, I don't know, a more pure way of living, or more adventurous. But I mean, being here now for a year again in Vienna, life is basically a trap. You're forced to be a small piece of this construct, be part of this society, but you cannot be actually the person you want to be very much anymore. You can have some hobbies and some passions, but you're forced to live a certain life, and the life is very similar. Most people just have a very similar life, actually.
Well, that's one of the things that I agree with, and I think a lot of it though is being determined by the technology that people use.
Yeah, it makes everything faster and worse.
But also everything is limited. Like, you're limited. The technology is not expanding the world. It's actually limiting the world that you live in. And it's limiting the ways you express yourself. People tend to think of it as being this great opportunity, but in fact it's just the opposite. Because there are bounds and limitations to the technology, which are part of the programming. And you can only express yourself as far as those bounds go. And if your life is lived that way, like let's say it's lived in 140 characters, that's why these people, when they're shut off Twitter, it's a catastrophic event for them, because this was their life, this was their voice. It sounds ridiculous to you and I because we don't use it, but imagine if this was what you lived for and you were on every day, and this was suddenly taken away from you and you were silenced. It's your life is over. I mean, it's a shocking development.
It's incredible.
I mean, you and I though our lives are lived in very free spaces, which there's no government looking at and determining, and corporations aren't determining what we're doing. We're careful not to become indebted or enslaved. If not tied down and trapped. If you avoid all the traps, you can have some measure of freedom. But it's so easy to fall into these traps, and the technology, though, I think is the worst one. And perhaps we're the last free people, because we were born at a time when there were no cell phones and there wasn't an internet, and the freedom is going to be less going forward as everyone is connected and globalized.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be no more unconnected experiences. To have experiences when the connection is not there. I don't know.
Me neither. For me, it is definitely much harder to be connected or to feel some kind of connection to the young generation. The young generation is, for me, so I always say, okay, you are maybe 10 years younger than me, but or I say this to old people because I take care of old people in wheelchairs, and then they say that I'm from a completely different generation compared to them. But I always tell them, okay, no, actually it's not true. Maybe you're twice as old as I am, so in their mid-70s. But we are more similar than. But I think you said that too, to this waitress in Texas, right? And it's totally true. We are more similar to much older people than to people just a few years younger than we are, because they grew up with all of this technology. Yes. And we did not. I mean, I got in touch with the internet the first time, I think, when I was 17, and it was extremely slow, so it was not at all a part of my life. back then. You used it maybe twice a week for 20 minutes to check your emails, but you did not get any emails anyway because nobody was using it back then. But it was extremely exciting to hear this noise of this modem and to finally be connected. I mean, now this was an experience. Seriously, you were connected to the internet, and nowadays you just get angry when you cannot find a connection immediately. So the last 20 years probably humans changed as much as never as before.
Well, I think we're still trying to figure out the changes. I think it's so early. You think of all the transformations of human life, and it's hard even to think of things like writing and how the ability to write things down transformed human life. But it did. It transformed human life in a big way. And I think it transforms how people think. And I think writing enabled people to think at a much more complex and higher level, because you could make an argument. You could remember what you just said and then build upon it, and you could move it to the next level, and you had a record of where you'd been, and you could develop these beautiful systems, these massive things that if you were just talking, it would be very hard to do. It probably would be impossible. And so thinking, the way people thought about the world changed. And I think now we have basically a kind of writing that is, with the internet is, you have all of this information. So how does this now change how we think about the world? Actually, the strange thing is, I think the world is being forgotten. I think the virtual world is more interesting. Mm-hmm. It may come to pass that the world survives all of these terrible things happening to it because people just want to go live in cities and be connected to the internet. If that's the way people want to live, then places like Patagonia will be just fine. No one's going to want to go there. Why would you go there? There's no city there. There's no internet. There's no reason to go. So it might be a good thing in a way.
Yeah.
There might be.
I like that view.
I don't know. There's, the interesting thing with the way the development of the world is, we tend to look at all the things that are going extinct, but when things go extinct, there are new pockets that are opened up that are very unexpected. You don't know what fills that pocket, and that views that extinction as a possibility to grow in some new way. Like, when the dinosaurs were made extinct, probably because of that asteroid hitting the Earth 60-something million years ago. The dinosaurs go extinct, but guess who is the result evolutionarily because of the dinosaurs' extinction? It's human beings. We never would have developed if the dinosaurs had not gone extinct. And so you think about the extinctions of like 90% of the large animals on the Earth, which is kind of going on right now, and you say, oh, that's terrible. But I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe it's not 90. I don't know. But a lot of the large animals are going extinct. You say, oh, it's terrible. We can see them disappearing. But what's not disappearing are like all of the living life, which is like 90% of it, which is like microbes and fungi. Like a lot of this stuff is having a great time. It's surviving, it's growing, it's loving life. So we're kind of selective in what we see, and you can't get rid of life, really. I mean, I suppose eventually you could, but life is very powerful at some level. At some level, something that seems so bad, it's enjoying it.
Yeah, but this is like a cycle back to where it all started, right? All the bacteria and virus and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't like the imagination that everything is going back this way.
I don't know. I think the hardest thing to think about is that all of these human projects, which we value so much, they could be just so much fossilized material that there's no one there to understand it or ever to see it or dig it up or care about it. It'll just be gone, and there'll be no one to look at it and to marvel at it. There's no other beings that will show up and dig it out of the ground and say, look at this object. I wonder how this works. And it was an old iPod, and they figure it out and they say, wow, these creatures that lived used these things. And they would put it in an alien museum and say the humanoids use these iPods. They would laugh about it and say that they're stupid creatures, but this is very interesting. There are these stupid creatures on this planet. Perhaps that'll never happen. There's be no one to dig us up and to say, wow, look at their cities, look at their internet.